Oh my gosh. Okay. So my name is Jess Keating, and I am really excited to be here today. And I had to laugh when I was looking at all of the ruler stuff. Like I went over some of the content that we have, and I was like, yep. So it's really fun for me to be here. The official introduction: I am a best-selling author. I am a scientist with a specialization in zoology and biology and ecology, and I am a shamanic soul coach. And I am a bit of a mixed bag. I love mixing creativity and soul work and neuroscience and biology to help visionary women build up what I call a thriving wealth ecosystem. So I was able to take all of the really amazing stuff that I learned in my science career and as a freelance entrepreneur. And then one day I literally just had this boof moment where it all kind of overlaid together in this beautiful, beautiful picture for me. So I'm currently working on that. And I just really, really love connecting with other visionary and I guess like rule breaking women. And I am from outside of Ontario, outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So I don't know if there's any other Canadians here today. I think you're all elsewhere. That's all right. I will represent. And I am a ruler, a maverick, and an accumulator. And it's pretty much an even split. But when I was going through these archetypes for this call, I was like, oh, it's mostly ruler these days. I think through the course, I've actually been able to kind of soften up some of the edges of the other ones, but the ruler has maintained a lot of its sharpness.
So the first question that I have for you, and Sandra, we're going to start with you on this one and go around, is when you took the SMA quiz, were you surprised by your results, or did you think, yep, that's just me, that's just me?
So I love that I'm last here in this, because I am pretty much on the other end of the spectrum, where I have, I think the lowest scores for me were connector and nurturer, and then it's ruler, maverick, and accumulator. And the thing that hit me first, it was like, yep, that's me. And I think you have, Denise, somewhere, like you mentioned, like I wanted an Oprah type business being a ruler. And I remember being like, oh, seen. And there was so many interesting little parts to that, because I didn't realize, I think the thing about maybe with just rulers in particular, but maybe it's everybody, the thing about my ruler was I didn't realize that I had been kind of partially holding that back a little bit. Like it was a part of me that it needed permission that I didn't realize needed permission to just be like, this is who I am. And the second part of that was when we did the Sacred Money Archetypes quiz. People are, sharing their answers, and all of these like lovely women that I know were like, oh, I'm a connector, I'm a nurturer, and I'm a whatever. And I was just like, am I a jerk? And I remember you, Denise, saying like, I'm a ruler. And I actually, like, I distinctly remember this, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but you were like, I love the people I work with, but at this, like in Money Bootcamp, like, I love all those people, but like, I'm not going to hold your hand. I'm not going to, like, that's just not me. Like, I think your connector was not your top either. And I remember just being like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'm allowed to be this way. And it's not even a fault. It's just something that is just who I am, and I can outsource, this, and this in my business. And it doesn't need to be this like character defect, like Sarah was saying, like, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just when we lean into what makes us, what lights us up. And what lights me up is that idea of like that word empire. It's just like, oh shit, yes. And the other stuff, once I kind of got over that initial hit of shame of like, oh, I don't really have, like, it was like 2 or something, like my connector and nurture vibe is just not there. But it doesn't mean I'm not caring. It doesn't mean I don't care about what I do or the people I work with, but really allowing myself to kind of embody that fully. And in particular, see models like you, Denise, who you just, it is who you are, and you don't make apologies for it. You're just like, oh, so then I do this, like I outsource this, or I try to angle my marketing towards these types of people, for example. Like those insights is just, they were so incredibly helpful, because like I said, you don't realize that there's this tiny part of you, or maybe a big part, that is kind of seeking that permission. And then once you get that, like from, you see it reflected in somebody else, or you get this kind of on the quiz or whatever, you're like, oh, I didn't realize how much of myself I was holding back. And once you do that, that's where the power comes from, right? Like once you can enable yourself to kind of be fully whole without apology, that is, of course, when things start to happen. but I was not surprised at all. And I have to mention, when I was talking to my husband about this and we were watching Hamilton at the time, and there were two lines in Hamilton. There was one where it's like, why do you write like you're running out of time? So my husband was like, that's you. And I was like, oh yes. And then it was, he will never be satisfied. He's like, that is also you. And I was like, yeah, I get that. And I think that's like the ruler and accumulator together. But again, seeing that not as like not everything is something to be healed. Like, yes, there's overworking. Yes, there's overdoing and overgiving and hustler and all that stuff. But not everything in me was like because of a trauma or a problem. Seeing that is just like a strength that not everybody else has. And some people would love to kind of lean into seeing that and being like, yes, I have some of that Hamilton energy right there. That's okay. And allowing that to happen was just really, really huge for me.
I want to go back in time a little bit. And Charlotte, we're going to start with you. Think about you as a little ruler. Did it come out? Was it suppressed? Were you called bossy as a kid? Where did that come up? And, did people say things to you about your rulerness as a kid?
It's just like turning into a therapy session, isn't it? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So same here. I remember I was rereading your book, Denise, and you talked about how like you started so many businesses when you were like 6. Like that was me. I tried to almost like monetize everything. I tried to start little, entrepreneurial endeavors. I started a library in my room once, and I put little sticker, like, the little pockets in the notebooks. And I did that not just to give away the books, but to be able to charge my brother late fees. I literally thought that was a really good business model because he was he was so scattered. I was like, I'm going to make a killing. So like, that was me. I was, like you said, like student council. I remember starting like a recycling program, like you mentioned, like you're pointing out solutions. It was that was kind of pushing me. But just reading some of the comments here, like give others a chance, or like don't speak up, let other people have a turn. I, like Sarah, felt you do feel shame. You do feel shame for kind of what you want and how much kind of maybe energetic space you take up. And I can remember having conversations with like my friends and even some of my family. Like I would watch Oprah, like another Oprah baby here, and be like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make like global impact. I'm going to, in my 5-year-old words or whatever, like I'm going to do this. And I can remember still being told like, oh, you lead a really rich fantasy life. And like for the first half, when you hear that, you're like, well, they're out of their mind. They don't know how big I'm going to be. And then of course, as you get older, like you start to kind of fold up your dreams a little bit, and, they go through the wash in your pants and all that stuff. And then you kind of look at yourself and you realize how much those voices have affected you. But I think part of the thing that helped me was like connecting with other women here who there is no shame. It's funny now because so many of us do this. Like we help women embody that fullness in whatever capacity, whether it's business or bodies or whatever. Like I think a lot of our ruler motivations likely come from the shame that we felt as a kid, just for being who we were. And, like for me, Denise is a great model because she allowed me to feel like, oh, it's okay to like love money and to want to build a big thing. It's okay to do that. And I think everybody needs those versions of models for them. But I think when it comes to being a ruler, like this world seems to be kind of built to kind of put everybody in their little box, which it makes sense in school. Like I get it, but there's also so many people who, like everybody here was told, like, don't get too big for your boots, you're too big for your britches. Or like, oh, you lead such a rich fantasy life. And like, that stuff is, when you're so young, like when you're older, you can be like, no, I know who I am because I've taken this course. Like I know these things. But when you're a kid, it just really starts to eat away at you. And I see Charlotte's comment here, like boys in school who were similar were more encouraged to lead. I'm like, ain't that the truth? Right. Like, and I think it was Sarah who mentioned, you tried to find a way to like show who you were, but also like not be too overt about it. Like that was the feeling I had of like, oh, I can be really ambitious. I can be really like assertive about what I want, but I'll just like dial it back a little bit to be a little more palatable for people and to not be a showboat or to not be a show off or arrogant or any of these things that I didn't feel like I was. It was just, that was my reality of taking up space, and that's how much space my soul or body or whatever needed. And kind of the internal dial of having to turn that down. I mean, thank gosh, now, like I get to be around people who don't, like they automatically put that dial up on purpose to kind of, embody that. But as a kid, it was a very, very different story. But I was right from the start, that kind of ruler energy. And it was, like Sarah said, it wasn't easy. Now it feels like a gift. But at the time when you're little, you just want to fit in. Like, you're just like, why am I different? Why is nobody else talking about starting a business and ruling the world like Oprah? Why? Like, do you not see how cool that is? And that, of course, leads to like feeling like an outcast and all the other things. So yeah, not at all surprising, but it was certainly something that I had to kind of grow into over time.
When you guys were kids, did you like the movies about business? Because I remember like the 80s movie Big Business with Bette Midler, or 9 to 5, or She-Devil, movies where women would start a business or they would move to the big city. And it was always so energizing for me because I lived in a small town, and I really resonated with that. Whereas probably a lot of my friends were watching, dreaming about getting married and watching those movies. I was like, oh my God, I want to be, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, where Christina Applegate, put on a suit and pretend, blagged her way into a corporate job at the age of 16. I was just like, oh, that's me. So I didn't ask the other archetypes this question, but I think it's really key for you guys. We talked about you as a little baby boss. Tell me about your corporate life or your jobs, because I think we can blag our way. I think we're really good at interviews. But where does that break down in a corporate setting or working for someone else, where, were you told, you're too big for your boots here? I was told, you just don't like following rules. And, I found all the, stuff around, let's all sign this card for Janet's birthday. I was like, oh, it can be fucked. And so there was just felt like a lot of busy work, and I just did not succeed in corporate life at all. It did not suit me.
Oh, so I'm just putting this together now. I have never really, apart from like being like 12 years old, kind of working at my mother's store, I've never worked for anybody else before. And I'm recognizing that's totally a ruler thing. The closest I came was actually in academia. So my original plan was to be a prof. I was going to be a science and zoology prof. And one of the reasons that I left, again, I'm putting this together like in real time, was I read this paper that when you're a professor or you're doing some specialization in the sciences, the only people who are really going to hear your work are like the 3 other people who are in the room when you're reading your thesis. And I remember reading that and being like, oh, hell no. Like the impact for me is currency. Like that is, I don't care how I'm getting it, but I just knew immediately when I kind of realized that, I pretty much woke up the next day and was like, I'm going to be an author. That's the next step for me. I'm going to try to meet as many people as I can out in the world. And that was the real reason that caused it, like a major pivot in my life. But and I'm thinking back of like, you're mentioning all those movies with like business women and stuff. I was like enamored with that idea. But I also knew from seeing my parent, like my mother, had like a regular typical job, and like the things you mentioned, Denise and Sarah, like signing cards and like, oh, it's so-and-so's, but I like, that's my hell. I don't know why, like that small talk, and then like, can you not just like, way to go, Hank. Like I just could not get my head around it. And I think that's probably why I like averted right to working for myself kind of from the get-go. But I was really enamored with that concept of like the working woman. But as we're talking, I'm thinking like, I don't think that was necessarily so much about like corporate lifestyle. What appealed to me was actually the power that those women had, like Christina Applegate being like, shoulder pads and putting it on and going in and like being so capable and getting that job done, whatever it was. That was the part to me that was really appealing. And even now when I see like these, Fortune 500 companies and like these badass women, even though I don't want to do what they do, even though I value like my free time above all else, and like, that's not my path either. There's something about that. It's like, oh, but the power and the impact there, that just feels so delicious. And finding kind of my way of getting there versus, somebody else's path. It's that impact that just feels so powerful. And I think when I look back at like the decisions I've made in my career to continue to work for myself, I didn't realize kind of until now, like I've always chosen the path of most impact. And even as an author, like before I got into like coaching and shamanic healing and all of these other things, I was an author and I was, doing really, really well, but I had the same epiphany that I had in academia, where I woke up one day and I was like, oh, time to expand. Like I've kind of run out a road on this particular path, and now I need to expand myself and what I'm doing to allow for more impact that I know is calling me. And I think, just hearing these discussions, like that feels to me like very much a ruler trait of like, where am I most needed, but where can I kind of fill up the most space with what I have to offer and not get shamed for it or, bad-mouthed or whatever, now that we're adults. So yeah, I was never in the corporate world. I was never in the world of working for other people, but I think it was because of how I saw that reflected in my real life. I just knew like, I'll be damned if I'm spending time, working my butt off so that so-and-so can spend like, half a day to go on vacation. Like I could just not stomach that, as a kid. And even now, my husband, he's in pharmaceuticals, like a very, upstanding, what I mean, typical corporate job. And I see like it's meetings after meetings after meetings. And I'm just like, oh my God, like how do you get anything done? Like, put me in, coach, let me do this thing. And like, I can solve this for you in like 10 minutes if you could just cut the crap. Right. But that's just, of course, the way I see it. But yeah, I will go out of my way to run from that if I can find something that will give me a place to have more of my own impact.
So I want to talk, I want to hear about sabotages, and I've just got this question here for you. And I think we're starting with Jess for this one, is how is your ruler stuff showing up and sabotaging in your business? Because we know that this is a good thing. We know it's great. But if you're not aware of it, or if you let some of those things sabotage, or I think the question is, are we actually fine? And it's our other archetypes that are sabotaging us? That's the question. Because, yeah. And a couple of examples, if you don't have it, and I'm sure you'll get them anyway, of like, do you outgrow things too quickly? Are you committing to things too much? Are you trying to work with the wrong clients and railroading them? Are you not pricing enough? Is it, is your business you can do this before SMA if you want. Did you realize your business model didn't work for your personality? So I would love to hear, like, how is this ruler stuff showing up, or is it your other archetypes that are actually ruining it all in the perfect business?
So yeah, I was going through the course earlier today, and one of the things that came up was that you want a ruler for like that gentle butt kicking. And I was like, yep, that's okay. And I can recognize a lot of my sabotages around being a ruler. I don't actually think that the traits of the rulerness were the sabotage. It was my own sense of like shame over them, if that makes sense. Like it was the feeling of like, oh, I need to be more connectory. I need to be more nurturing or whatever, and not truly allowing myself to lean into my strengths there. Like the minute I hired out somebody to do like the nitty gritty tech stuff, like that was just a like huge level up for me, just being able to do that. And recognizing, I think you also say like, we tend to do things the hard way, or find the harder way to do things. And there's a line that you mentioned in it as well that was, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that for me, like I have a real love of learning. Like I love to know, oh, how does this work? How does this work? And I really had to start asking myself the question, say to myself, like, okay, if you spent a few hours, you could figure this out. Like I could figure out how to set this up tech-wise, or I could figure out how to, dig into this person's personality and figure out how to sell them or whatever. But I had to ask myself, do I want to get good at this task? Like, and if it wasn't something that actually appealed to me, I had to give myself permission to just either outsource it, or, 9 times out of 10, you could just not do that thing. And like your business is going to be fine. And in terms of like business models, it's funny, as I was going over them, all of the teacher model options for the ruler are things that I had inadvertently done over the course of my couple careers. Like I've had a few careers now. So like I've been the speaker, I've been the author, I've been the coach, but it's only in the context of like, I want to run a big kind of group empire and kind of dip in coaching call wise rather than like one-to-one. And one of the things that beforehand I struggled with that was definitely a sabotage was I was listening to, as I got into more of a coaching or mentoring perspective with like soul work and neuroscience, I knew what I wanted. Like my ruler was like, I envision this to be a massive, global group community ecosystem where everybody's bringing their energy. And I could picture this thing like to a T, but all of the advice that there was like, oh, well, you can't do a group until you've outsold your one-to-one. Like that's kind of pretty common advice that we hear. And I remember there was a few weeks there where I kind of was on the fence about it. And it's the same feeling of like going to corporate. I could not stomach it. And it's like, it's not that I don't love my people that I work with. It's not that I don't think I could be good at it, because I had done one-to-one before kind of as one-offs and it was great, but it was that path of impact. And I was like, no, I'm really driven to do this as a group. Like I'm driven to do this program as a group. So that was kind of my moment of revelation where I had been sabotaging myself, spinning those wheels, wasting time, just like, oh, should I listen to so-and-so who loves one-to-one and therefore she's telling me it's a great thing to do, or do I do what I know is right for me? And the minute I did that, like I launched that group program and, talk about like money up levels, like I made, close to $250,000 my first time out the gate. But I only think I could do that because I finally let myself lean into almost the satisfaction of how I felt it was okay for me to run my business, rather than, listening to others, really well-meaning advice. Like that advice could have been right for me, but maybe it was a ruler thing that I just kind of had a completely different vision, or maybe it was a bit of a maverick thing too, but there was something about that just didn't sit right. And I know that it was the shame, kind of reflecting from when I was a kid, oh, you're too big for your britches, right? Like, who are you to break the rules? And, how dare you be a success on this thing when you haven't done the time? And like Sarah said, like, why would I start at the bottom? And I know how that sounds. I can hear myself saying that. And I'm already thinking like, man, people are going to watch this and be like, wow. But like, it's not meant to be an arrogance. It's just, I know where I'm called and I know what I'm compelled to do, and allowing that to happen and letting that unfold. Like there's always hiccups and everything, but letting that unfold without feeling like I need to feel shame for it. And I realized, in SMA, like you mentioned, we find a way to do things the hard way. And I think you can see that in two perspectives. Like one is like, we try to do everything ourselves, right? We try to do the tech, we try to do the funnel, we try to do every little thing. But I also think the other way of doing it the hard way is really just to like ignore your own tendencies. Like doing it the hard way for me would be like, well, I guess I better put up a sign outside my door and do one-to-one for the next 3 years. Like that would be the hard way for me. And I think there's a lot of kind of inner work we have to do to recognize, like, despite the fact that there's a learning curve and the natural hiccups of just, growing in a business, it doesn't need to be this like long ass slog that people tell you it can. And it's not to say it's going to be an overnight success either, but why would you posit that as like a must have? Why does Sarah need to work 12 years in the nursing to get the top? Like if you're good, you're good, and I think that rulers, we seem to have, just from our conversation tonight, we seem to have this innate knowledge of what we're good at. And it's not everything, but like the things that do light us up. Yeah, like we just know. And if we can kind of lean into that. So I would say my biggest self-sabotages are not necessarily coming from the ruler like traits. It's not leaning into them without letting all the other conditioning, maybe the kind of guilt and stuff over not being the other archetypes, like looking outside the window being like, oh, but I'm not a connector, boo-hoo. Like you said, when you posted in bootcamp once, Denise, about like, oh, that was Mara who sent that. Like it was like a freaking light went, and I was like, I can do that. Like I could just have somebody be kind on my behalf, and it's not a bad, like that was groundbreaking. Like, honestly, it sounds so silly, but I was thinking like, oh my God, I don't have the bandwidth, especially with like a big group. Like, I was like, how does she do it? And it's like, of course. And we love you all for it. Like, we love you all the more for it, right? Like, those little things of just allowing. And I like, now I know enough. I'll say to my husband, like, oh, this is a ruler thing. And I'm feeling guilt about this. Like, I'm feeling like a bit of a jerk right now for kind of wanting to bulldoze through this here, because I don't want to wait. Like, it's like, it's not a democracy, right? I want it and I want it now. And yes, we are in a world where patience is a virtue sometimes, but I also think as girls and women in particular, we're given that message enough. Like you said about your son, like, he will have enough models of successful, lovely men who are rich. It is also important for girls to get that too. And I think ruler women in particular maybe have a little bit more kind of up against them to kind of overcome. So yeah, that's my long-winded spiel about ruler sabotages. I don't think I've encountered a lot of sabotages from being a ruler. It's not leaning into it and letting all the other stuff kind of get in my way there.
Here's the problem with this call already is I'm like, I think I need to start a new Instagram account just for the archetypes. I was like, oh, I need a new home for that. And I've been so disciplined, for a long time in like All Roads Lead to Boot Camp. And I think sometimes there is that part of me. I'm so excited about doing the money archetypes because there's so many possibilities, and it's so fun, but it's also part of that sabotage for me of going, oh, I'm not going to just do one, I'll do 8. Or like with my book series. So I've just done the Money Mindset for Natural Health Practitioners book. The writer's one is at the edit. So of course I'm not writing one book, I'm writing a series of books like the 4 Dummies guides. And then each one takes so much longer than I think because I'm like, oh, I'll just like copy and paste and change it. But of course I don't. So instead of being a 20,000 word book, they're like 70,000. They're a proper book size now. And then I realized recently, I was like, oh, I don't have to write a book for everyone straight away. I can start with a blog post. Oh, okay. And then whichever one becomes, more exciting to people, then I'll write the book about it. So it's almost like we need a moment to realize we're allowed to have discernment. And, it's so hard to pull back, exactly, Jess, because we take the action. So as soon as I came up with this idea of like, okay, now I've got the editor, now I've got the person, now I've got the co-writer, now I'm looking for, okay, who has, for the dance teachers one, who already has dance teachers? Maybe I can co-write books with them. How can I do? And then, so what I realized is that we're an empire of empires. So each one of our empires would be more than a full-time business for somebody else. If someone was a speaker, that's a full-time business for someone. If someone's a coach, that's a full-time business for someone. And so now I'm like, well, I'm going to be a publishing house, and I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be this, and it can be a little bit exhausting. So that's how it sometimes, it can burn me out a little bit. And I can forget about the discernment piece and go, hang on, wait. Actually, it would be really smart to start with the blog post. It might actually get me the same result than having to spend, a couple of months writing the book. The first one took like 18 months because it was over COVID. The second one took, it's probably going to take 5 months. I want to get it down to like a month process, because I'm like, let's churn them out, guys. The other thing that I realized too is that we haven't, spoken about is the gender stuff, the devil wears Prada. How dare a woman be such of a boss and so transactional with her employees, that there's a whole movie made out of it, when that's just commonplace behavior for men who are praised for that. And there's 2 quotes from that are so funny. When she says, by all means, move at a glacial pace. You know how that thrills me. And I'm like that sometimes when I see, I ask for something maybe from Mark, who is a ruler too, and I can see the wheels churning and I'm like, come on, get me the answer right now. And then when she says, bore someone else with the details of your incompetence, it's like, I can't deal with the incompetence. And it's so unsexy. Incompetence is so unsexy. So I realize we don't have much time left. I would love to hear and we can go on for a little bit longer if you want, but I want to respect that time, is and I think we're starting with Sandra this time, is that right? Yep. Just the final thought, like, what would you say to rulers who are thinking about joining SMA?
Oh gosh, so where to begin? I think if you're a ruler, I believe that you are innately a visionary. I believe that you are an empire builder and that you are here to really shake things up a bit. And I have to say, from my experience, all of the stuff that, life is conditioning you to and telling you is a defect is actually really the gold mine that rulers have. So SMA is just such a fantastic place to step into and explore all of those parts of yourself that you maybe thought were not so great. You maybe thought that they were bugs in your system that you needed to fix, but instead they are, that's how the system is built to work best. So being able to recognize that and kind of see yourself mirrored, not only on paper in what you're seeing in all the materials, but also in the people who also identify as rulers and, all of the cool qualities that they embody, kind of that broader sense in community and ecosystem of what rulers can accomplish when they lean into their gifts, when they work through all the self-sabotages. And I think that I'm not as clear on the other archetypes, but with rulers in particular, I feel that the majority of our self-sabotages, it's all up here, right? And allowing yourself to embody the space that you want, to execute the vision that you want in a way that kind of gets the job done for you, rather than feeling like you have to second guess yourself all the time or be more like so-and-so or more like whoever. I think that as a ruler, you do have an innate blueprint on your vision. And from there, one of the great things about SMA is that, you have these materials to actually help you begin to strategize. Like, it can be really daunting. That's the other thing that we don't really talk about often. Like, it's also really daunting to sit there as a ruler and to have this grand vision. And you feel like you have to kind of swallow the sun to make this thing happen. And then you're kind of thinking like, well, okay, what next? And as a ruler, you're likely going to want to do the biggest and baddest and boldest thing just because that's your impact. But there's also strategy in there too. So being able to go through, the course materials to say, okay, well, what model kind of feels like home to me? What am I maybe missing in my marketing to draw in people like this or people like this? And being able to recognize where you fit in that broader ecosystem of all of these money archetypes is so helpful, because I think as rulers, we can kind of it's not clouded by the vision, but we're looking at it from such a broad scope. We can forget that, it's not not everybody thinks the way we do. And that's a good thing, right? But it's kind of finding a way to work with all of the community that you want in your life and in your business, and to not maybe leave people out that you didn't intend to, or to invite people in that would really make your business even richer. So, as others have said, it is basically permission to be yourself that you didn't even realize you were waiting for. And I would highly recommend it, especially to rulers, but pretty much across the board, because it is such an amazing way to know yourself better, and then to actually put that self-knowledge into action in your business to make more money.
So, are you a ruler, a connector, or a maverick? Hang on, maybe you're more of a romantic or a celebrity. Take the Money Personality Quiz right now and find out which of the 8 money archetypes you are. And then I'm going to teach you how to profit from your strengths and make money in your business based on your natural personality. Click below and find out more.